When my own life was threatened by pancreatic cancer nearly a decade ago, I had no choice except to make my body inhospitable to cancer, or die. Doctors had nothing for me beyond very risky surgery, which was nearly fatal. Consequently, I was forced to find out how this insidious disease had gotten a foothold in my body and specifically how I could reverse that cancer-friendly internal environment. I found a consensus in my extensive research: cancer, indeed disease, needs all the aspects of chronic inflammation to set up shop in body tissue. Rather than focusing on these aspects here, allow me to shed light on how chronic inflammation can arise in our bodies. As the title of this article implies, our amazing immune systems are involved because inflammation is a very normal, useful process if and only if it is able to follow its innate job description, and be an emergency responder rather. We know from our first skinned knee in childhood that we bleed, we experience local heat, redness, swelling and sometimes plasma seepage. If debris remains, we can see pus develop. And we generally trust that all these mechanisms will disappear fairly soon, just as we expect that the emergency medical technicians will depart once a trauma patient is stabilized. This efficient, first responder, immune system is critical to our survival. We don't have to know exactly how all those amazing immune cells do their many jobs, but we are normally glad they do because they take care of all the non-self stuff that tries to invade our wounded bodies. Most people don't know where our immune system mechanisms originate within us, although we may realize that something in a trauma situation triggers their delivery through our bloodstream. We learn this much from a splinter in a finger. Still, we take this life-saving system for granted because we see it work. We see wounds heal. Then we go on with life unaware that there was an awesome built-in mechanism to notify this system when it became time to pack up the equipment and go back to ready mode, because all the first responder duties had been fulfilled. In other words, the immune system job description covers work meant to occur only between an on switch and an off switch. Although it's fascinating to study the behind-the-scenes life of our immune system, we really just need to appreciate its constant and complex adjustments while realizing that every part of our lifestyle either helps or hinders these adjustments. Eating, drinking, sleeping, exercising, worrying, thinking, laughing, etc. all directly impact the function of our immune system, thereby causing it to move outside its intended parameters. So how does the immune system forget its job description, so that an efficient first responder becomes confused, overworked and even systemically destructive? I learned that the initial stimulus can be primarily physical, emotional, mental, or environmental. Some form of stress or insulting force is either sustained or repeated long enough to trick the immune system into a cycle of exhausting biochemical responses. I might compare this stimulus phenomenon to dial 911 on a repetitive basis, with the immune system obediently responding to each biochemical call, so that all the immune mechanisms pile up in the body like a massive ambulance wreck that bursts into flames. More specific examples of a stimulating cause might be receiving repetitive verbal abuse, feeling helpless, very common in cancer patients, holding on to resentment, bitterness, hate, guilt, fear, worry, shame, etc. Toxic emotions. Being exposed to consistent environmental stress, toxins in air, water, skin products. Experiencing repetitive physical trauma or stress, like lack of sleep, chronic dehydration, lack of rest, stressful exercise habits. Eating a high glycemic index diet, sugar directly feeds inflammation, equals cancer fertilizer. Eating a diet lacking in molecules providing body cells with essentials for life processes. Habitually breathing in a shallow way, well-oxygenated cells resist cancer. Not exercising for hormone balance and lymphatic fluid movement. In recent decades we have learned through psychoneurophysiology, science combining study of emotions, mind, and body, that the chemicals spilling into our bloodstream to turn on our first responder immune system are the same chemicals evoked by repeated persistent stimulation, regardless of whether the source is mental, emotional or physical. Any of these can lead to systemic inflammation that undermines life at the body cell level, which, of course, is where cancer can form. Thus it is certain that toxic thoughts and words stimulate inflammatory physical symptoms that can be temporary or chronic. We've all experienced the temporary type every time we've blushed because emotions evoked by words or actions stimulated a physical response of flushing, heart rate increase, etc. Traditional medicine still resists the body-mind connection because the mind has long been deemed immeasurable. However, good science has now measured emotional chemical responses by proving the existence of receptors for such chemicals on all body cell membranes. The stimulus of chronic inflammation can, indeed, begin in the mind or emotions as well as in the body. In fact, it is arguable that the mind and body cannot be separated in these reactions due to discoveries made through both psychoneurophysiology and quantum mechanics. Further considering the link between cancer and inflammation, we know that chronic cumulative inflammatory responses start with particular, alarm, chemicals and proteins spilled into the blood. The blood vessels then become more porous and plasma and certain blood proteins increasingly leak into the space between body cells, pushing capillaries away from cell membranes. A cascade of events occurs which leads to cells becoming unable to receive delivery of nutrients and oxygen through their membranes. Thereby cells cannot generate energy for themselves or for us, and do their unique work for the body tissue they live in. Pancreas beta cells can't make insulin, for example. Lack of oxygen in cells eventually stimulates pain. Unlike normal cells, all cancer cells can live well fermenting sugar in the absence of oxygen. Wastes aren't carried away from fluid between cells because the lymphatic vessels and veins can't take up all that extra fluid and large protein molecules. Thus evolves a perfect environment for cancer, including acidity from the fermentation, lack of oxygen, weakness and death to normal cells, low or no energy generation, cessation of normal cell reproduction, starvation of normal cells, chemical and protein abnormalities. Tumors generally take time to form and, in that process, emit chemicals that trick the body into building new blood supply toward themselves while normal cells are still struggling and gasping for life. The wonderfully made and highly complex, emergency, immune system is not meant to work constantly like a medical intern is often pressed to do. It is meant, as I've described, to rush to a trauma site, clean it up, then to stimulate growth of scar tissue and new blood supply. When the mission is accomplished, it is biochemically called off the site to await the next 911 call. In my own cancer situation, I realized that my challenge was to reverse the circumstances that forced my body-mind essentially to keep 911 on redial mode, thereby confusing my immune system. I had long been dormant in my faith, but I soon came to understand that my holding on to resentment and bitterness for literally decades, and not forgiving according to my faith, had kept the destructive chemicals churning. My healing began spiritually and emotionally by removing emotional, mental toxins with great prayer support. I share this bit of information to illustrate how overcoming chronic inflammation stimulated emotionally opens the door to whole health of body, mind, spirit. Physical healing followed the spiritual healing when I kept the process simple by only putting into my body substances my immune system read as real food molecules rather than as non-self molecules, like those in manufactured and processed foods. Our bodies, in fact, are made from the same molecules as the food we are meant to eat, and our immune system knows which molecules those are. That eating protocol meant I was taking this God-given opportunity to eat lots and lots of plant-based organic vegetables and copious amounts of colorful organic berries, as well as plenty of fresh vegetable juices. I also made sure I got plenty of omega-3 fats, mainly through a flax oil recipe. I totally left off sugar, highly inflammatory cancer fertilizer, and all foods that quickly converted to sugar, breads, etc., with an attitude that my food was my medicine. I did not eat meat or dairy, with few dairy exceptions, for several years, and then added only organic grass-fed meat and dairy in small amounts. I still do only highly filtered or distilled water, often with organic lemon juice added, and no soda, whether sweetened with sugar or artificial sweetener. My only sweetener is stevia, an herb with zero glycemic index, blood sugar index. Mentally, I could not afford to let denial into my thought life. I added deep breathing exercises and simple lymph-moving exercises that were both physically and mentally healing. Literally, by the grace of God, I cleaned up my thought life and learned to speak health rather than death over my body, mind, and I made sure those around me did the same. The cure for cancer is, in fact, restored inner health, and a healthy body cell can never become cancerous. Respecting our awesome immune systems, job description, is key.